It couldn't be real. The buffalo. It was a mountain of flesh and fury, its bloodshot eyes defying Yakutia's 70 wonder sea. Anya felt the ground tremble beneath her fur boots as the 5,000-kilo monster snorted, icy vapor exploding from its nostrils. Her arrow, the sole hope of a starving village, seemed like a twig against that living wall. Her late husband's empty sled, now her only companion, lay meters away, unreachable. The wind howled, mocking her audacity as the buffalo lowered its head, preparing for the final charge. And she knew that would be the last sound she heard before the ice swallowed everything. The ground trembled once more, and Anya felt her heart pound like a war drum in her frozen chest. The buffalo, a colossus of fury and flesh, charged forward, its horns sharp as ice spears, ready to pierce. There was no time to think, only to react with the speed that life on the tundra had taught her. Her feet, heavy in her reindeer hide boots, moved by pure instinct, a quick step to the right, an awkward leap over an icy ridge, and the frigid wind of the attack grazed her shoulder, almost knocking her down. She felt the dense air shift with the beast's passage, the animal's strong, wild scent invading her nostrils, mixed with the icy breath of death. The ice beneath her groaned under the impact of the buffalo's hoof. For an eternal instant, the world narrowed to the deafening roar of the beast and her own ragged breath, a white cloud in the cold darkness. Anya stumbled, her gloved hands touching the slippery, cold surface of the ice wall that rose mercilessly behind her. She was cornered, with no escape. The buffalo spun with surprising agility for its colossal size, its red, bloodshot eyes fixed on her, an undeniable promise of annihilation. The sled, with her husband's old weapons, the village's only hope, was too far away, meters distant, a remote hope that seemed to mock her helplessness and human fragility. A wave of despair hit her with the force of a blizzard, colder and sharper than Yakutia's relentless wind. The image of her village's starving faces, her granddaughter's hopeful eyes, of every child who depended on her, flashed in her mind. Would this be the end of everything? Her husband's sacrifice, her own exhausting and solitary journey, all in vain. Her lips trembled uncontrollably, not just from the biting cold, but from the deep pain that mingled with paralyzing fear. She closed her eyes for a brief, almost imperceptible second, and in that instant of darkness and despair, a soft, familiar voice, full of affection, echoed in her mind. It was the voice of her beloved husband, Taigin, teaching her years ago about hunting, about life and resilience. Anya, my brave one, the greatest hunter is not the strongest, but the most cunning. Every animal has a weak spot, even the most fearsome. You must observe. Remember what nature teaches us. The image of Taigin, with his warm smile and wise eyes, brought a sharp pang of longing, but also a spark of clarity and renewed purpose. She opened her eyes, and the world seemed to slow down. The buffalo was just meters away, snorting, exhaling icy vapor, preparing for the final lunge that would crush her against the ice. Its horns, once merely threatening, now seemed different. Taigin had spoken of this, not just about brute force, but about surgical precision. There was a small area, almost imperceptible beneath the thick fur, behind the shoulder blade, where the skin was thinner, where the animal's natural armor yielded to vulnerability. An ancestral technique, almost forgotten, that he had shown her once, more as a curiosity than a practical lesson for a woman. But now, in that crucial moment, it was the only chance for salvation. Her body, exhausted and aching from days of pursuit and cold, found an inexhaustible reserve of energy she didn't know she possessed. The grief that consumed her, the pain of loss, the overwhelming responsibility for her village, all merged into a single, powerful determination. She could not fail. She could not allow the cruel winter to claim more lives, more hopes. She looked at the buffalo, At the weak spot, Taigin had taught her with such care, and a fierce, almost wild courage ignited in her eyes, a fire amidst the ice. It was an immense risk, a maneuver that demanded absolute precision and a speed she wasn't sure her tired limbs still possessed. The buffalo charged again, its horns lowered, tearing through the icy air with brutal, uncontrollable force. Anya did not retreat. Her eyes were fixed on the exact spot, her mind clear as ice crystal. She felt her heart pound, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from a new and desperate hope, a promise of life. With a cry that defied the wind's howl, a cry that carried the weight of her village, the memory of her love, and the resilience of a people, she propelled herself forward not to flee, but to face destiny. The arrow in her hand seemed to come alive, aimed at the only spot that mattered, transforming her vulnerability into a lethal weapon, ready for the final confrontation. The arrow in her hand seemed to come alive, aimed at the only spot that mattered, transforming her vulnerability into a lethal weapon, ready for the final confrontation. In the next instant, as the buffalo lowered its head for the devastating blow, Anya lunged, not backward but to the side, a swift, unexpected movement that took her out of the path of the horns, yet placed her dangerously close to the animal's massive body. Her muscles screamed in protest, but adrenaline was an icy river coursing through her veins. With a strength that surged from her soul, she propelled the arrow, not with a hunter's brutality, but with a dancer's precision, aiming for the exact spot Taigin had taught her. The flint tip, sharpened with years of care, found its mark. There was no roar of pain, only a dull snort, a violent tremor that ran through the buffalo's body. The colossus staggered, its red eyes now clouded, its fury draining into confusion. Anya retreated quickly, her heart still pounding, watching with a mixture of dread and hope. The buffalo spun in slow, clumsy circles, like a mountain that had lost its base. The vapor from its nostrils diminished, the heavy sound of its hooves on the ice became uncertain. Its horns, once so menacing, now seemed heavy, dragging on the frozen ground. Anya felt a knot in her throat, a wave of emotions washing over her. There was no joy in the beast's defeat, only the deep, bitter necessity that had driven her. The animal, a grand and wild creature, was yielding to the inevitability of its fate, and she was the instrument of that fate. Slowly, with a deep groan that seemed to come from the frozen earth itself, the buffalo began to fall. First, its front knees buckled, then the massive body tilted to the side, raising a cloud of snow and ice as it fell. The impact resonated across the tundra, a final sound that marked the end of a battle and the beginning of a new chance. Anya watched, her eyes welling up not from the cold, but from the overwhelming relief that flooded her, mixed with the silent sorrow of taking a life. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and she brought them to her face, covering her eyes for a moment, allowing the tears to freeze on her cheeks. Exhaustion hit her like an avalanche, and she felt her legs give way. But there was no time for weakness. The village awaited. With a deep sigh, Anya composed herself, wiping away her tears. She walked to the buffalo, now a silent mountain of flesh and hide, and knelt beside it. She touched its thick fur, almost feeling the warmth that still emanated from the body. "May your strength and spirit nourish my people," she murmured, an ancestral prayer Taigin had taught her. The sled was just meters away, and now the most arduous task began, preparing the animal and loading it. Every movement was a monumental effort, her aching muscles protesting with each pull, each precise cut. Taigin's knife, heavy in her hand, seemed guided by a greater force. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes, time distorting in the biting cold. The sun was already beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of orange and purple, a reminder of the passage of time and the urgency of her mission. Finally, with the last of her remaining strength, Anya managed to load the sled. The buffalo meat, carefully prepared, weighed an enormous amount, much more than she had imagined possible to drag. The sled, once empty and light, now sank into the snow, demanding every ounce of her energy to move. She tied the ropes around her own body, feeling the weight of hope and responsibility on her shoulders. Anya looked towards the horizon, in the direction where she knew her village awaited. The image of the starving faces of her granddaughter, with eyes bright with expectation, of every elder and child, ignited a new flame in her heart. The cold still bit, exhaustion was overwhelming, but the sight of the life she carried was a balm for her soul. With a final breath of determination, she pulled the ropes, and the sled began to move slowly towards the village. Every step was a prayer, every pull a promise. She was not just dragging meat, but hope itself, the resilience of a people, the memory of a love, and proof that, even in the most frozen heart of Yakutia, life would find a way. Anya felt every fiber of her being protest. The weight of the sled, a promise of life, was now a colossal burden, dragging her onto the icy ground. Her shoulders ached, leg muscles burned with every step, sinking into the virgin snow. The icy air cut into her lungs in white clouds that quickly dissipated in the twilight. The pale sun on the horizon would soon yield to total darkness, intensifying the cold and making the journey even more treacherous, a final test of her endurance. She pressed her lips together, a thin purple line on her wind-chapped face. Her eyes, once fixed on the horizon, searched for a point of reference in the infinite whiteness. With each pull, images surfaced. Her grandmother's wrinkled face, telling stories of harsh winters and the strength of the Yakut people. Taigin's smile, teaching her to tie knots, to read the stars, to feel the pulse of the tundra. He would be proud, she thought, a solitary tear freezing at the corner of her eye, a silent tribute. But the image that drove her most was that of the village. She almost heard the hungry silence, the muffled cry of a child, the dry cough of an elder. She saw lost gazes, pale faces, hope dwindling, and then her granddaughter, small and fragile, with large, dark eyes full of an innocence that didn't deserve hunger. Anya tightened her grip on the sled ropes, her knuckles white. It wasn't just for herself, nor for Taigen's memory. It was for each of them, for every heartbeat that depended on that heavy burden. Her community. The wind blew with greater intensity, raising snow whirls that whipped her face, blinding her. Visibility decreased. The path back, once clear, became an indistinct haze. Fear, suppressed during the confrontation, crept back. An insidious cold. What if she got lost? What if the blizzard swallowed her? The meat would be useless if she couldn't deliver it. She stopped, panting, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. Her body trembled uncontrollably from exhaustion. She raised her head, scanning the dark horizon. No stars yet, just growing darkness and the monotonous howl of the wind. But then, a small light, almost imperceptible, flickered in the distance. A campfire? Could it be? Her heart leaped, a renewed hope. It was faint, distant, but it was a light, a sign. With renewed breath, Anya straightened her body, pulling the ropes with a strength she didn't know she possessed. The light, faint as it was a beacon, a promise of warmth and life. She was not alone. Her village awaited, and perhaps someone was already looking for her. Every step was more determined, though painful. With every meter, the light grew, a point of brightness in the relentless darkness. She felt gratitude, a deep connection with her people, with the ancestral wisdom that had guided her and was now calling her back. The journey was still long, but the loneliness dissipated, replaced by the certainty that life, after all, would find its way back home. Anya pulled the sled, every muscle aching. The small light on the horizon was a beacon. It was no longer Taigin's memory or the hungry faces. It was the promise that she was not alone. The light flickered, faint against the immensity of the tundra, but it was real. Her chapped lips curved slightly. Exhaustion was overwhelming, but hope now was stronger than the biting cold. The sled, laden with the meat of salvation, dragged through the deep snow. Anya felt the ropes cut into her shoulders, the pain radiating. The wind, once mocking, now sounded like an encouraging whisper. She imagined who might be behind the distant campfire. Pyotr, the old hunter, or her friend Lena. The thought that someone was waiting for her, that someone cared enough to brave the deadly cold, warmed her chest. With each step, the light grew, revealing contours. The light snowfall obscured her vision, but Anya knew she needed to stay focused. Slowly, with unwavering determination, she continued, her pace heavy and steady, like the beat of a tired but unbreakable heart. The light became more defined, and Anya could finally distinguish the glow of a campfire and the silhouettes of people. Her heart swelled with emotion. It wasn't a dream. They had come for her. A wave of gratitude washed over her. Her people, her family, had not forgotten her. With a final effort, Anya took a few more steps until the figures became recognizable. It was Pyotr, the white-bearded elder, and Lena, her childhood friend, her worried face illuminated by the fire. There was a third, smaller figure whom she recognized immediately. Her granddaughter, Naya, bundled in a fur coat, her eyes wide with expectation. "Naya!" Anya's heart tightened. Her granddaughter was there, in the biting cold, waiting for her. Pyotr was the first to see her, his wrinkled eyes widening. He pointed, and Lena turned, a muffled cry of relief escaping her. Naya, sensing the commotion, turned too, and her small eyes met Anya's. For an instant, the world stopped. The girl let out a cry of joy, a pure, crystalline sound that cut through the wind's howl, and ran awkwardly through the snow towards her grandmother. Anya released the sled ropes, feeling immediate relief. Her arms opened, and Naya threw herself against her, hugging her with a child's strength. The warmth of her granddaughter's embrace, the smell of home, was the most powerful balm. Tears, which had frozen before, now flowed freely, warm and abundant. She buried her face in the girl's soft hair, feeling the small body tremble with cold and emotion. "My little Naya," she whispered, her voice choked. Lena and Pyotr approached, their faces marked by worry and relief. Lena hugged her tightly. "Anya, you did it! You're alive!" Pyotr, with a solemn nod, placed a hand on her shoulder. "We knew you would return, daughter. Your strength is the strength of our people." The campfire crackled. The buffalo meat was proof of her triumph. Hunger would be driven away, hope rekindled. The return had begun. Anya released the sled ropes, feeling immediate relief. Her arms opened, and Naya threw herself against her, hugging her with a child's strength. The warmth of her granddaughter's embrace, the smell of home, was the most powerful balm for her exhausted soul. Tears, once frozen on her cheeks, now flowed freely, warm and abundant, mingling with the girl's soft hair. She buried her face in Naya's hair, feeling the small body tremble with cold and emotion. "My little Naya," she whispered, her voice choked, a knot in her throat that was half pain, half gratitude. Lena and Pyotr approached, their faces marked by worry and relief. Lena's gloved hands squeezed Anya's shoulders. Her friend's eyes, once clouded with worry, now shone with a relief that warmed more than the campfire. "Anya, you did it! You're alive!" Lena exclaimed, her voice choked, pulling Anya into a tight embrace, an embrace that conveyed years of friendship and the strength of a sisterhood forged by winter. Pyotr, with a solemn nod, placed a heavy, wrinkled hand on her shoulder. "We knew you would return, daughter. Your strength is the strength of our people. Taigin would be proud." The elder's words, spoken with the wisdom of years, touched Anya deeply, bringing comforting warmth to her frozen heart. The campfire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the snow. The buffalo meat, visible on the sled, was undeniable proof of her triumph, the promise of life she carried. "We need to take it to the village," Anya said, her voice still hoarse with emotion and fatigue, but with new energy. Pyotr, despite his age, was already assessing the colossal sled. "It's a heavy burden, but together we will manage. The village is waiting, Anya. Hope in their eyes is dwindling." Lena, without hesitation, took the sled ropes, offering her strength. "I'll help. Naya, stay with Grandpa Pyotr near the fire." The girl, though reluctant to let go of her grandmother, obeyed, her eyes fixed on Anya, a mixture of admiration and fear. The journey back, once solitary and exhausting, now transformed into a shared endeavor. Anya and Lena pulled the sled, their muscles screaming in unison, while Pyotr, ahead, broke trail in the deeper snow, lighting the way with an improvised torch. Naya, small and determined, walked beside the elder, occasionally looking back to make sure her grandmother was still there. The buffalo's weight seemed to lessen with the combined effort, the solidarity of her people transforming the burden into a symbol of unity. Every step was an act of faith, every pull a silent prayer for everyone's survival. As they approached the village, the glow of the main campfire grew more intense, and the silhouettes of the huts emerged from the darkness. A murmur of voices, once muffled by the wind, began to be heard, growing into a chorus of expectation. When the first hut became visible, a cry of surprise and joy erupted from the gathering crowd. "Anya, she's back! She did it!" The voices echoed, filled with a relief that spread like wildfire across the tundra. Women, children, and elders emerged from their homes, their pale faces now illuminated by new hope, their eyes fixed on the laden sled. Anya felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. It wasn't just the meat she brought, but life itself, the promise of a new dawn for her village. People ran to meet them, their faces contorted in smiles and tears. Hands reached out to touch the sled, to feel the meat that signified salvation. Children, once hungry and silent, now jumped with joy, their shouts filling the icy air. Hunger would be driven away, hope rekindled. Anya, exhausted but with an overflowing heart, looked at Naya, who was now running to embrace the other children, her eyes shining with the promise of a future. The return had begun, and with it the legend of a woman who defied winter and brought life back to the frozen heart of Yakutia. Anya was enveloped by a tide of human warmth. Hands touched her, faces smiled, tears of joy streamed down. The children, with Naya at the forefront, danced around the sled, their cries of "Meat! Meat!" echoing. Pyotr and Lena helped unload the buffalo, and the village mobilized. Larger fires were lit, steaming pots placed over the flames, and the aroma of fresh meat filled the air and their hearts. Anya sat exhausted near the main campfire, Naya nestled in her lap, eating eagerly. She observed the faces of her people, illuminated by the fire, hunger replaced by hope. That was her triumph. Proof that life could flourish even in winter. Lena sat beside her, offering her warm broth. "You are our hero, Anya. You saved everyone." Anya nodded, unable to speak, emotions choking her. The pain was immense, but the sight of her people fed was the best remedy. The days that followed were of blessed relief. The buffalo meat was carefully stored, ensuring food for a while. Energy returned to their bodies, laughter to their lips. Anya, despite her weariness, felt a renewed purpose. She was no longer just Tigan's widow. She was Anya, the hunter, the savior. The admiration in their eyes, especially Naya's, was a balm for her soul. However, Yakutia was a relentless mistress. A week after her return, while the village celebrated the momentary abundance, Pyotr called her for a serious conversation in his hut. The elder, with his grave face and deep eyes, sat before her. "Anya, what you did was a miracle. But winter is still long, and the tundra is vast and unforgiving." He paused. One buffalo will not sustain the village until spring. Our firewood stocks are dangerously low, and small game hasn't appeared for weeks. The other hunters, still weak or scared, won't risk it. Anya felt a chill run down her spine, not from the external temperature. The euphoria of victory began to dissipate, replaced by new and heavy concern. She had focused all her energy on the buffalo hunt, seeing it as the definitive solution. But Piotr was right. That was only the first step, not the end of the journey. The village needed more than food. It needed a plan, continuous leadership. "What will we do, Piotr?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper, feeling the weight of responsibility fall upon her shoulders. "We can't hunt another buffalo so soon, and I can barely move." Piotr sighed. "We can't. But we need firewood, and perhaps there's a chance to find a herd of reindeer in the highlands. It's a dangerous journey, and no one dares to go." He looked at Anya, and she understood what he wasn't saying. The village now looked to her. The buffalo heroine was the only one with the courage for what came next. It was an unexpected burden, a new responsibility. She thought of the hunters, strong men who now seemed small. The dependence in their eyes was palpable. Her legend was not just of a heroic feat, but of a new expectation, a hope that fixed itself upon her. Her victory had created a new challenge, to sustain that hope. The turning point was not a new monster, but the realization that the struggle for survival was a marathon, not a sprint, and that she, the widow, was now the reluctant leader of her people. She closed her eyes, her face marked by exhaustion and gravity. Yakutia offered no respite. The question was no longer whether she would survive, but whether she could guide everyone through the white hell that still stretched ahead. Anya opened her eyes, feeling the weight of Piotr's words hang like an icy mist in her soul. The hunt, once the climax of her struggle, revealed itself to be merely the prelude. She, Tigan's widow, the hunter who had saved the village, was aching and grieving. How could she carry everyone's burden? The image of Naya, with eyes full of life, appeared in her mind, not for herself, but for those eyes, for every one of her people. Piotr, sensing her turmoil, touched her hand. "You are not alone, Anya, but the strength to inspire, to lead, comes from you. Discouraged hunters need a sign." He paused. "Firewood is our priority. Without warmth, the meat will be worthless. The reindeer, that's a journey for the strongest. They don't dare." Anya felt the bitter truth. She had brought food, but hope needed to be nourished. Leadership was responsibility. She took a deep breath. "Firewood then," she said firmly. "We need a large expedition, and the men will need courage for the forest." The next morning, the pale sun barely broke through. Anya, despite her aches, was on her feet. She walked to the main hut, where young hunters and elders gathered, their faces marked by malnutrition and discouragement. Piotr and Lena were already there. When Anya entered, a respectful silence fell, eyes lifted, mixing admiration and expectation. Anya felt the weight of those gazes. Necessity had pushed her. She raised her head, her posture dignified. "The buffalo bought us time," she began, her voice clear. "But time runs fast. We need firewood. Fires cannot go out." She looked at everyone, an appeal. "Fear is cold. Hunger is colder. Darkness without fire is death. Our ancestors taught us to fight. Higgin taught me that the tundra gives us what we need if we have courage." One of the hunters, Boris, hesitated. "Anya, the forest is dangerous. The cold is biting, and the wolves, they are bold." Anya nodded. "Yes, Boris, the danger is real, but the danger of doing nothing is greater. I'm not asking you to go alone. We will go together. I will go with you." The words, spoken with simplicity, caused a murmur. The idea of Anya, the widow, leading a firewood expedition was both shocking and inspiring. She had hunted the buffalo alone. Now she offered her presence for the vital task. Lena stepped forward, a hand on Anya's shoulder, silent support. Pyotr nodded. The hunters' faces changed. Hesitation gave way to determination. The sight of Anya, exhausted but unbreakable, willing to face the cold, was the spark they needed. "So who comes with me?" Anya asked, her voice resolute. One by one the men stood up, their eyes meeting hers. It was no longer about fear, but about the strength of community, the promise that together they would face the winter. The firewood journey, once impossible, became the next step in her people's long and arduous trek, guided by the courage of a woman. The next morning, the air cut like blades of ice. The sun, still a distant promise, tinged the horizon with a pale, cold blue. Anya, despite the aches that still coursed through her body, was on her feet before everyone else, preparing for the firewood journey. She donned her thickest furs, checked the fastenings of the smaller sled which would be used to carry tools and the first bundles, and sharpened Tigan's axe, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. When the hunters gathered, their faces were serious, but there was a new light in their eyes, a spark of determination that hadn't been there before. Boris, with his usually gruff demeanor, was the first to approach. "We are ready, Anya," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Where does the forest lead us?" Anya nodded, a small smile appearing on her chapped lips. "To the oldest trees, Boris. Those that have withstood many winters and hold warmth for us." Lena and Pyotr were there to bid farewell, their gazes filled with pride and concern. Naya, bundled in a fur coat, clutched Lena's hand, her large, dark eyes fixed on her grandmother. Anya knelt, hugging her granddaughter tightly. "I will return, my little one, with firewood to warm our dreams." The girl nodded, a quick kiss on her grandmother's icy cheek. The expedition set off, a silent line of men and one woman dragging small sleds with axes and ropes. The deep snow made every step difficult, and the cold seemed to penetrate even the densest furs. Anya led the way, her experienced eyes reading the signs of the tundra, seeking the least treacherous paths, the spots where the snow was most compact. She felt the hunter's gaze on her back, the expectation, the doubt, the growing trust. The silence was broken only by the crunch of snow under their boots and the distant howl of the wind. The forest of birches and pines rose, dark and imposing, its trees covered in snow like white ghosts. With every meter the air grew denser, and the sunlight, now a pale disk high above, barely managed to penetrate the canopy. Anya stopped, raising her hand. "Here," she whispered, pointing to a cluster of trees further north. "The oldest ones, those that have fallen naturally and are dry. We will not cut down living trees, only what the tundra offers us." Boris and the other hunters looked at her, surprised. They had expected to cut down younger, easier trees, but Anya's wisdom was clear. Respect nature, use what was already available, conserve energy. "She knows what she's doing," Pyotr had said, and now they saw the truth in his words. The work began. The axes, once heavy and cold, now cut the wood with a steady rhythm. Anya, despite her exhaustion, worked alongside them, her strength surprising the men. She showed them how to cut dry branches, how to stack the firewood efficiently on the sleds. With each bundle tied, each piece of wood stacked, the spirit of the expedition lifted. The fear of the cold and the dangers of the forest diminished, replaced by the satisfaction of working together. Sweat ran beneath their furs, steam rose into the icy air, and laughter, once rare, began to echo among the trees. At the end of the day, with the sun already setting, the sleds were loaded. The weight was considerable, but the sight of the firewood, the promise of warmth, was a balm for the soul. Anya looked at the hunters. their faces dirty and tired, but with a gleam of pride. "Well done," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "Now, the way back." The return would be arduous, but loneliness had been replaced by the strength of a group. They were not just carrying firewood. They were carrying hope, connection, and proof that together they could face any winter. The journey back, with sleds heavy with firewood, seemed even longer in the forest's darkness. The wind's howl, an icy gust, whipped their faces. Anya led the way, exhausted, but the sight of the firewood, a promise of warmth, propelled her. The tired hunters followed her pace. Boris, behind her, observed Anya's wisdom in testing the snow, a deep respect growing. Suddenly the wind intensified with fury, a violent gust bringing a dense curtain of snow. In seconds, visibility dropped to almost zero, the world a white blur. The heavy sleds began to be pushed, threatening to overturn and scatter the firewood. A cry of alarm escaped, and panic set in, like a frost in their hearts. Anya, however, remained calm. Yakutia had taught her that despair was a more deadly enemy than the cold. She raised her voice, cutting through the wind's roar. "Gather close, one at a time. Hold on to the sled ropes. Don't lose contact." Her voice, marked by fatigue, carried authority. The hunters hesitated, but the firmness in her eyes was unmistakable. Boris reacted first, grabbing the rope tightly. The others followed, forming a human chain, unbreakable links. Anya felt the tension in her shoulders, the cold burning her nostrils, but the connection with the men was an unexpected warmth. She remembered Taigin. True strength lay in trusting others. His memory now was not pain, but a compass. She continued to advance, one step at a time, feeling the wind's resistance and the collective strength that opposed it, a testament to human resilience. Boris, with narrowed eyes, saw Anya stop. She bent down, feeling the snow. "Here," she cried, her voice almost inaudible. "There's a crevice. Follow my steps, one by one, carefully." The crevice, hidden by the snow, was an invisible danger that could have swallowed a man or a sled. Anya's ancestral wisdom, her ability to sense the terrain, was the only thing that saved them. Carefully, they skirted the crevice, the tension palpable, but their trust in Anya unwavering. When the gust subsided, as abruptly as it began, the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The silence that followed was almost deafening, broken by the crunch of snow and their breaths. The hunters looked at Anya, their faces marked by cold and fatigue, but with respect and admiration. She was not just the widow who had hunted the buffalo. She was the leader who guided them, the flame that would not be extinguished. Anya, feeling the relief and the weight of responsibility, nodded. "Keep going," she said, her voice hoarse but firm. "The village awaits us." The journey resumed, slower and more cautious, but with a unity forged in adversity. The firewood on the sleds was not just wood. It was tangible proof that even in Yakutia's harshest conditions, human connection and leadership could transform fear into hope and weakness into collective strength. They were returning home not only with warmth, but with a renewed fire in their hearts. The journey back continued under the pale moonlight. The group, united by adversity, moved as one body, each man feeling the presence of the other, the collective strength that propelled them. Anya, exhausted, felt the image of the village campfires as her guide, a distant glimmer of hope. Boris, now by her side, offered her a piece of dried meat, a silent gesture of camaraderie that Anya accepted with a grateful nod. The salty taste and fibrous texture brought a little energy to her chapped lips. As they drew closer, the smell of wood smoke intensified, mingling with the distant barking of dogs. The first huts emerged like ghosts in the darkness, their windows glowing with the yellowish light of oil lamps. A murmur of voices, once muffled by the wind, grew into a chorus of expectation. When the expedition finally stepped into the village clearing, a cry of relief and joy erupted from the waiting crowd. Lena and Pyotr were at the forefront, their faces marked by worry that now transformed into a radiant smile. Naya, bundled in a fur coat, broke free from Lena's hand and ran, her small feet sinking into the snow until she threw herself into Anya's arms. The grandmother, kneeling, pressed her granddaughter against her, feeling the warmth and familiar scent of home. "Grandma, you're back," Naya whispered, her voice muffled but full of contagious joy. "You brought the warmth." Warm tears streamed freely down Anya's cheeks. Pyotr approached, his wrinkled face softened by a smile. "Welcome back, my children. You brought more than firewood. You brought the flame of hope back to our homes." He placed a heavy hand on Anya's shoulder, a gesture of deep respect. Lena, with tear-filled eyes, hugged her friend. "Anya, you are our rock. I don't know what we would do without you." The men of the village, now stronger and more confident, helped unload the firewood, stacking it carefully near each hut. The campfires, once small and sparse, were fed generously. The icy morning air was soon filled with the joyful crackle of wood, and warmth spread, driving out the cold that had settled in their bones. The children, once huddled, now played near the fires, their rosy faces reflecting the dancing light, a spectacle of life and renewal. Anya watched, sitting near the main fire, Naya nestled in her lap, asleep from exhaustion and security. The physical pain was still there, a constant ache in her muscles and joints, but the sight of her people warmed. The feeling that she had fulfilled her promise was a balm that soothed her soul. The children's laughter, the murmur of conversations, all of it was music to her exhausted ears. However, Anya's mind could not fully rest. Yakutia, she knew, never relented, and winter, with its sharp claws, still stretched for months. The firewood, though abundant now, would one day run out, and the question of food continued to hang like an icy shadow over the village. Pyotr, sitting beside her, as if reading her deepest thoughts, sighed, his eyes fixed on the flames. "Anya, what you did was magnificent, a true miracle for us. But the tundra has many faces and demands constant vigilance. Firewood gives us warmth, yes, and that is vital, but the stomach needs more to sustain life." He paused, his gaze drifting to the pale horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. "The scouts have returned. They saw tracks of a large reindeer herd in the highlands, further north than usual. It's a dangerous place, with biting winds and treacherous ice that can open beneath your feet at any moment. But it's our best chance, perhaps our only one, to secure enough food for everyone until spring arrives." Anya felt an icy grip in her chest, a wave of discouragement mixed with familiar resilience. Exhaustion dominated her. Every fiber of her being cried out for rest. But the image of her people's hungry faces, the memory of Naya huddled in cold and hunger, compelled her to move forward. Leadership was a heavy burden, yes, but she could not retreat now. Everyone's fate rested on her shoulders. The journey for the reindeer would be even more challenging than the buffalo hunt, and she knew, deep in her heart, that the village would expect her once again to guide the way through the white hell. She hugged Naya close, the girl's warmth a constant and powerful reminder of her promise of life and hope. She hugged Naya close, the girl's warmth a constant and powerful reminder of her promise of life and hope. Anya, with Naya still asleep in her lap, felt the weight of Pyotr's words and the cold that settled in her heart. The promise of life and hope that Naya represented was the only thing that kept her from succumbing to exhaustion. She looked at the dancing flames, seeking in them the strength that seemed to be draining away. The journey to the highlands for the reindeer hunt would be the most dangerous of all. Treacherous ice, biting winds, and the need to bring food for everyone. How could she, A woman already exhausted and grieving faced yet another such colossal challenge, but the image of the hungry faces, the sound of the children's laughter who now played warmly, all of it screamed in her soul. She had no choice. The next morning, even before the sun rose, Anya was on her feet. Her muscles protested, but her mind was clear. The village needed her. She gathered the hunters, the same men who once doubted, but who now looked at her with unwavering respect. Boris, with a serious look, was the first to step forward. "We are with you, Anya, for the reindeer, for life." Others nodded, their voices echoing the determination. Lena and Pyotr watched, their eyes filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Naya, this time, did not cry. She just hugged her grandmother tightly, a quick kiss and a "come back soon, Grandma" that resonated in Anya's heart. The expedition set off under a grey sky, a line of sleds laden with minimal provisions and hunting tools. With each step, the terrain became steeper and more treacherous. The wind, an invisible enemy, whipped their faces, turning the snow into ice needles. Anya led the way, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the highlands rose like white walls. She felt the ice crack under her boots, a sinister sound that reminded her of the fragility of her existence. With every crevice hidden by snow, every stretch of thin ice, Taigen's wisdom, the lessons of a lifetime on the tundra, guided her steps. She pointed out dangers, led the way, and the hunters followed her without question, a silent trust growing between them. After days of strenuous marching under a cold that seemed to suck the very life out of them, they finally reached the highland plateau. The scenery was of brutal beauty, vast and desolate. The wind howled incessantly, sculpting the snow into dunes and sharp ridges. Suddenly, Boris stopped, pointing to the valley below. "Anya, look!" His eyes widened. The sight was spectacular and terrifying. A colossal herd of reindeer, hundreds of them, perhaps 1,000, grazed in the snow, their antlers blending into the icy landscape. They were larger animals than usual, with dense coats and an aura of wildness that made the heart clench. The promise of food was immense, but the challenge of hunting and transporting such a quantity of meat in such hostile terrain seemed insurmountable. Anya felt a chill run down her spine, not from the cold, but from the magnitude of the task. Yakutia once again presented its cruelest test. She looked at the hunters, their faces pale and their eyes reflecting the same mixture of awe and despair. The silence was broken only by the wind's howl and the distant sound of reindeer hooves. The buffalo hunt had been a singular confrontation. This was a battle against nature itself, against the immensity and ferocity of an entire herd in one of the most inhospitable places on earth. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. She could not fail. The village depended on her. With a determined look, she raised Taigen's axe, a gesture that seemed to defy winter itself. "Let's go," she said, her voice firm, laden with a courage that transcended fear. "The life of our people depends on this." The epic hunt was about to begin, and Anya, the hunter widow, was ready to lead her people through the icy abyss. Anya raised Taigen's axe, a gesture that seemed to defy winter itself, and with her firm voice, laden with a courage that transcended fear, she said, "Let's go. The life of our people depends on this." The hunters, though pale, felt the spark of her determination ignite in them too. There was no time for hesitation. The hunter widow, with the wisdom of generations in her eyes, began to devise a plan. "We cannot attack head-on," Anya explained, pointing to the vastness of the herd. "They are too many, and panic would scatter them, losing them in the whiteness. We need strategy, patience. Taigen taught me that reindeer, despite their strength, are guided by the wind and snow. They seek natural shelters." She indicated a narrow passage between two rocky elevations covered in snow. "Boris, You and 2 other men will position yourselves there in silence. When I give the signal, use your staffs to create noise, but without violence, just to direct them. Pyotr, you and the others will come with me. We will flank the herd, using the wind to our advantage to gently push them towards the passage. The plan was risky, requiring coordination and a deep knowledge of animal behavior, but the trust in Anya was palpable. The men divided, moving with the discretion of shadows, each feeling the weight of responsibility. Anya and her group began to circle the herd, slow and calculated steps, using the small depressions in the terrain to remain hidden. The wind, once an enemy, was now an ally, carrying their scent away and helping to guide the reindeer. Hours passed, the cold penetrating to their bones, but no one complained. The tension was almost physical. Anya, her heart pounding, watched every movement of the reindeer, waiting for the right moment. Her eyes, accustomed to the white vastness, caught Boris's signal, a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. With a low cry, yet laden with authority, Anya and her group began to move, striking their staffs against the snow, creating a sound that, without being aggressive, diverted the reindeer's attention. The herd, sensing the change in the environment, began to stir. Slowly, with the precision of an experienced shepherd, Anya and the hunters guided them towards the passage. The reindeer, larger and wilder than those they usually saw, were a force of nature. Their antlers, like dry branches, intertwined in a primitive ballet. Boris and his men emerged, making enough noise for the reindeer to enter the crevice, where the tighter terrain made them easier to manage. There was no explicit violence, only human cunning against the brute force of nature. With the herd partially contained, the hunters, following Anya's instructions, managed to isolate a sufficient number of animals to ensure the village's survival. The hunt was a triumph of intelligence and patience over strength. Exhausted, but with a gleam of victory in their eyes, the men began the arduous work of preparing the meat and loading it onto the sleds. The weight was immense, but the sight of so much food, the promise of abundance, gave them renewed energy. Anya, though her muscles trembled with fatigue, felt a deep relief. The village would be saved. The journey back was long and strenuous, but the group's spirit was unbreakable. They carried not just meat, they carried the certainty that they had overcome another of Yakutia's tests, guided by the courage of a woman. When they finally sighted the village lights, a chorus of joy and relief echoed. Lena, Pyotr, and Naya ran to meet them. The village was saved, and Anya, the hunter widow, had once again ignited the flame of hope in Yakutia's frozen heart. The village air vibrated with an almost palpable expectation. The lights of the oil lamps danced in the windows, and the smell of wood smoke mingled with the sweet aroma of hope. When the first sleds emerged from the darkness, laden with the promise of life, a unison cry of joy erupted. Children bundled in furs ran ahead, their parents and grandparents close behind, their faces illuminated by smiles and tears. Lena and Pyotr were at the forefront, their eyes fixed on Anya. Naya, her hair flying, was the first to reach her, her small arms squeezing her grandmother with surprising strength. "Grandma, you're back! You brought life." The girl's words, simple and pure, touched Anya's heart like no other victory. She knelt, hugging Naya with all the tenderness her exhausted body could muster, feeling the warmth of life pulsing. Pyotr approached, eyes welling with gratitude. He simply placed a heavy hand on Anya's shoulder, a firm squeeze that spoke of respect and admiration. Boris and the other hunters, exhausted, had a gleam of pride in their eyes. They unloaded the meat with renewed enthusiasm, each piece a testament to the courage and unity that had brought them there. That night, the village celebrated. The campfires crackled higher, and the air was filled with the delicious aroma of roasted meat. Children laughed and ran, their bellies full, their hearts light. Adults shared stories of the hunt, their voices full of admiration for Anya's cunning. The pain of grieving for Tigen was still a scar, but now it came with a new understanding. His legacy was not just the memory of a great hunter, but the wisdom he had passed on, the strength she had found within herself to protect her people. Anya watched the scene, sitting beside Pyotr and Lena, Naya asleep in her lap. Weariness enveloped her, but it was a good weariness, that of one who had fulfilled her purpose. She saw Boris and the other hunters, once skeptical, now chatting animatedly, their bonds strengthened by the ordeal. The village was no longer just a group of families, it was a united community, forged in the heat of adversity and the flame of hope. The months that followed brought a less frightening winter. The reindeer meat was carefully stored, ensuring food for everyone. The abundant firewood kept the huts warm. Anya continued to guide her people, no longer as the grieving widow, but as the wise and courageous leader Yakutia had shaped her to be. She taught the children about the secrets of the tundra, respect for nature, and the importance of unity. Anya's village flourished. The women, inspired by her strength, found new ways to contribute. The men learned to value strategy and patience. Tigen's memory was honored, not with sadness, but with the celebration of the life he had helped preserve through his wife. Anya, now a revered matriarch, found peace. Her heart, once frozen by grief, was warmed by the love of her family and her people. She looked at the white horizon, at the imposing mountains and the vast tundra, not with fear, but with deep respect. Yakutia would continue to challenge them, yes, but they would be ready. Together, with ancestral wisdom and unbreakable human resilience, they would face any winter, any storm. The legend of Anya, the hunter widow who saved her village, would be told for generations, a beacon of hope in the frozen heart of the world. Years passed, and the flame ignited by Anya never diminished. The village, once on the brink, flourished under her wise leadership. The children who once shivered with cold and hunger now ran and played, their laughter echoing in the vast whiteness, a sound of pure joy. Naya, now a slender and curious young woman, was her grandmother's shadow, absorbing every word, every gesture, every lesson about the tundra. She saw in Anya not just the grandmother who loved her deeply, but the strong woman who defied destiny. Anya, her hair more silver than fresh snow, sat near the main fire observing her people. Her eyes, which had seen so much pain and despair, now shone with deep serenity. The pain of Tigen still visited her in dreams, but not as paralyzing grief, rather as a tender memory of a love that shaped and strengthened her. She taught the young ones about the secret reindeer trails, the subtle signs of ice and wind, the importance of every life in nature's web, hunting techniques, reverence for life, sharing and gratitude. Boris, now more mature and thoughtful, was her right-hand man, a respected leader among the hunters. He and the other men who once doubted now considered her the village's moral compass. Anya taught us that true strength lies not just in muscles, but in mind and heart, he would tell the younger ones, sharpening a knife. Lena, always by Anya's side, had transformed the matriarch's hut into a center of wisdom, where women gathered to weave, sew, and share stories, strengthening the bonds that held the community together. One day, a different challenge presented itself. It wasn't hunger or extreme cold, but a subtle change. The scouts returned with news that the rivers, once predictable, now showed unexpected cracks, making the crossing to fishing areas more dangerous. It was a new problem, requiring a solution, without the desperate urgency of the past, but with the same need for wisdom. Pyotr, his voice laden with concern, brought the news to Anya. "It's as if the land itself is changing, Anya. Our old methods may not be enough." Anya listened intently, her fingers tracing patterns in the thin snow. She felt not the panic of old, but a calm determination. She convened a council, not just the hunters, but also the older women, the most perceptive young people, and even Naya, who observed in silence, but with attentive eyes. Yakutia teaches us to adapt, Anya began, her voice soft yet firm. Our ancestors faced many winters, and each one brought a new lesson. We cannot fight against nature, but we can learn from it. She proposed that the young people, with their agility and fresh eyes, explore new routes, observe ice patterns with renewed attention, and that the women develop new land-based fishing techniques should crossing become impossible. It was a collaborative approach, valuing everyone's contribution. Naya, inspired by her grandmother's words, was the first to volunteer to explore. "Grandma, I can go. I remember your teachings about how to feel the ice." Anya smiled, a smile that warmed the heart. That was the true legacy, not just survival, but the transmission of knowledge, the ability to inspire and empower future generations. The village, united, began to work on the new adaptation. The young people, led by Naya and Boris, mapped the routes, testing the ice with long poles, their movements careful and full of purpose. The women, with Lena at the forefront, experimented with new traps and preservation methods. The atmosphere was not one of fear, but of a shared challenge, of a community that knew that together they could overcome any obstacle Yakutia presented them with. Anya watched, her heart overflowing with gratitude and hope. The legend of her courage had transformed into a way of life, a philosophy of resilience and unity that permeated every fiber of the village. Yakutia, with its relentless beauty and constant challenges, continued to be the stage of their lives, but now they faced it not only with strength, but with a wisdom that blossomed with each new winter, an eternal testament to the human spirit.